my goodness, what an introduction. Thank you, Aaron. That's really, really kind. Yeah, really kind. And thank you to Broken Sleep for giving this wild creature a home. I don't know what genre the book is, and I don't think I will ever know. I don't think I will ever quite work out what genre the book is. Luke Kennard was one of my endorsers for it, and he referred to it at some point as being a little bit thought experiment and a little bit memoir. And I thought, yeah, okay, that probably covers a chunk of it. But yeah, a lot of playing around went into this book, and I genuinely didn't think that it would ever become a book. I just thought it would be this wild creature that lived on my desktop. So thank you to Broken Sleep for giving it a home. Just for some wider context and sort of a bit of content warning stuff, I guess. Your Body is a House Stripped is the second person narrative of someone experiencing an eating disorder. So it is not a gentle read, but it is a hopeful one by the end of it, she says somewhat optimistically. So I'm actually gonna jump right into the start of the book and read the first vignette that kind of gives you a flavour for how the body is described across the novella, and then jump into chapter 2 after that. So chapter 1. Imagine this. Your body is a house stripped from the pages of a Gothic novel. There was a fire once in the hearth of the home, and it burned through the soft furnishings. It took with it the comfort of crushed velvet curtains and the grand armchairs you once enjoyed quiet afternoons in. The books, oh the books, you lost great expectations, persuasion, as I lay dying. The shelves bowed against the heat and were buried under the weight of hot paperbacks and hardcovers. Your body, the house that is, became an origami structure where one room folded or fell neatly into another. Things that were once upstairs now sat in the belly of the building. The skylight was no longer a panel, but the whole head of your structure, fragmented and gaping with crisp white remains around the edges. Cracks between blown out windows and their frames whistled with every wind that ran through you, and for a long time, that was the only noise. The authorities investigated what had caused the fire, citing several points of origin. The kitchen seemed the most likely space, with the wide open mouths of angry pots and the fury of the stove. There was always something to be cut and cooked and force-fed, and it wouldn't surprise you if the constant stream of steaming foods had led to this structural collapse. It was a theory you kept to yourself, even though others mentioned it too, although of course there were those who accused you of being the cause, as though you would do such a thing, and to your own body, home. 2. Getting dressed in the morning isn't as easy as it used to be, partly because you can't stand to look at your body in the mirror, and partly because you can't not look at your body in the mirror. You make your ribs into a tally chart of days since you've done things, enjoyed a snack, eaten with your family, liked yourself. You can't get dressed quickly enough in clothes that are too big for you, but in being too big, they hide that you're too small, not small enough. It used to be an idle pleasure, seeing yourself smaller in things that used to be just right. Goldilocks was the first to teach us that finding things that are just right for ourselves can often lead to some kind of catastrophe though. So with that in mind, maybe it's no wonder that you're trying something too small. You tried too big already. You shake that thought away. The intrusive one that speaks in your hard voice, but not with a soft tongue, all the while thinking how right it is. You finish preparing yourself for the day by painting on a face that feels clown-like, but everyone loves that you're wearing more makeup now. They call it experimenting with your style, but it feels more like hiding in plain sight. When you leave the bathroom, fully clothed and desperate for a cup of tea, you collide with your mother in the hallway. "Those clothes are getting too big for you," she says. "Oh, shush, they are not. They are, love. I can see a real difference. This hurts you." You've never kept anything from her, not really. You may have hidden the occasional crafty smoke when you were younger, or the odd night out on the lash when you were staying at a mate's and going straight to college, but everyone was hiding those sorts of things. The girls, when you were all young enough for it to be trendy, they tried to hide their eating disorders too. In the same way that you grew out of your puppy fat, they grew out of their brittle bones and into their beautiful bodies. You did it the wrong way round, though, like a body myth that shows the protagonist becoming thinner, weaker, more angular as the story progresses. It feels like a regression when you think of it this way, as though a mental illness is something you're allowed when you're younger, but by the time you're pushing 30, you should know better. And then a little bit later in that chapter, you love the quiet of the morning downstairs. For a while, you don't have to think about anything but the task at hand, which is usually answering emails and taking phone calls. You're working remotely now. It's a brave new world mid-pandemic, which means you don't have to contend with colleagues either. You handle several social media accounts for a small advertising company, although you're one of many helping hands at the job, so the company hasn't really felt small for a while. There's enough to keep you all busy and out of each other's ways, bar the occasional instant message to ask something that isn't usually related to work. While the kettle boils, you lean back against the kitchen counter. You pretend not to notice how uncomfortable the work surface is against the braille of your spine. The garden looks beautiful. You've put a lot of effort into scattering seeds liberally about the place and hoping for the best, and it seems to have really paid off. There are small wild gardens appearing in clusters, as though each set of seeds has formed a faction, and you wonder whether they're planning to overthrow the sunflowers. There's so much food on the work surface. It's nothing offensive or drastic, nothing that you wouldn't eat if you could stand to. There's a glass biscuit jar packed full of custard creams, hobnobs, rich teas, digestives. Smaller jars have smaller sweets, chocolate buttons, ice gems, raisins, peanuts. Your mum hasn't had a sit-down conversation with you about food, but oh, she's talking about it. You eye each container up and down like a suspect in a criminal case, and you consider trying to convince yourself to eat something, but it's only mid-morning and you know you can do better. When the kettle's boil whistles to a close, you make the drinks and treat this as a distractor task. You're aware eating is important, you understand how the human body works, that is, but there are lots of other important things in the world that also aren't being done. On days like today, that feels like justification for leaving your stomach empty, although you've arrived at a point in your recovery where you no longer know whether you want to feel empty or full, nor do you know whether these words have anything to do with food. And I'm going to read one last bit from a little bit later in the book. I said to Aaron when and the rest of the readers when I joined, it's really difficult to read from this book because it's a really difficult book to read. But I also really wanted something, I don't know, gentle to finish my reading with. But I also don't want to give away the very last chapter because tension and suspense. So I managed to find something that feels a little gentle from later on in the book. So this is Another one of the body vignettes, and this is number 13. Imagine this. Your body is a tree house. Your parents built it for you with inherited materials, which is to say its integrity is not always sound. Their input was shared, with one providing more physical labour than the other, one providing an inherent sense that you will never be enough for anyone to carry into your adulthood. This has stained the wood in places. Since its conception, the tree house has developed splinters. There are nails hammered in at awkward angles. In January rain, the roof leaks onto the chessboard of carpet cut-offs. But it is hard to mend these problems. Standing in a skyscraper at the same time as trying to modify it is no easy feat. The innards, though worn, are open plan, and they are wont to let the light in. There are bean bags that spill polka dots onto the floor, posters of a vampire you thought was especially attractive in season 7 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, notes that you and a once friend wrote to each other in a code you no longer remember the hieroglyphics for. It is a treasure chest of formative encounters. In the corner, there is a literal chest that is full of Pringles and chocolate-covered pretzels and crumpets, though there is no toaster, because your remaining parent was told by the people who are trying to help you that having things around that you like, read, might want to eat, will improve your stay here. You have told them you do not want to live in a tree house anymore, which is not the same as saying you do not want to live. And in time, you see the distinction between these things. You observe that even as you have grown, this structure has held you. It has always held you, despite efforts to fingernail pick the paintwork and stress the timber to the point of warping, and somehow this body, treehouse, has endured. It has become self-repairing, as though powered by a kind of magic.